Welcome to the pre-show for the Poetry Club for tomorrow, May 28th at 11 a.m. PST at the Reader Bookstore. It will also be on IG Live. Let me I'm making myself small so you can see the diagrams and the pictures, right? So the book is Your Wound, My Garden by Alok Menon, who is a South Asian non-binary genderqueer poet and activist and educator. And their pronouns are they, them. My pronouns are also they, them. And yeah, let me play some music while I wait for more people to show up. Hello, it's Existential Potato, Saraka Sherman. Yeah, let me play some music. All right, so tomorrow I'm doing a poetry book club for AAPI Heritage Month, which is Asian American and Pacific Islander Month, and that's why I'm choosing a South Asian author and their book, Your Wound, My Garden. And some of the pictures that you see are basically artistic diagrams that I made that are inspired by some of their poems. One of the pictures you see the quote, "Care is our natural state," and which is from one of their poems. In fact, I think it's the same title. The title of the poem itself is also "Care is our natural state," I think. Yes. And then you see below that another diagram, right? You see it's in small, very small up there. That's why I enlarged it down there. Basically, the quote, the poetry line is, "Things are not only spoken into existence, but also spoken into extinction." And so that's why I made that diagram, right? On the left-hand side, you see things becoming bigger and bigger when you receive support, such as your grade, and then so they're spoken into extinction. But when somebody tells you to shut up or stop, or they tone police you or silence you, those things become smaller and smaller. So that's the diagram that I drew, inspired by these quotes. And I want to start by reading one of their poems. So basically, there's a live where I just read some of their favorite poems from their book, Your Wound, My Garden. And then tomorrow we'll go live a little bit again. It's in person, but it's kind of a hybrid where I'll go live a little bit with the participants, and we all share our favorite poems and discuss it live on the air together. So there's a pre-show because it's quite possible tomorrow we may not be able to go through. Maybe we may not have time to go through all the poems that I might want to go through. So I want to start with this poem called "The Deepest Breath" because it's the sentiment as a Hindu. It's so similar to my sentiment about and a lot of the stuff that I've been writing about oneness and the interconnectedness of all life, of nature. And when I say oneness, when I, as an indigenous person, say it, I mean a real oneness, not the whitewashed version, which, the European colonizers only say when they want to appropriate our culture. Then they'd be like, "Oh, but we're all one." No, I'm not talking about that oneness. I'm talking about a real oneness. All right, this is called "The Deepest Breath." On the other side of now, when this is all over, I want to attend a funeral every day. I will sit at the back silently crying. When they ask, how I knew her, I will smile. Through the tears, I didn't. But I loved her because once upon a time she breathed, which means that the particles that touched the deepest parts of her, she exhaled them, and somehow they found their way to me. I am the product of everything that is and was, all that has lived and all that has died on this earth. I'm sorry that it took a virus to help me remember that simple fact, that we breathe the same air. Poem. Yeah. In fact, I'm sure that was written around the pandemic because it kind of references the pandemic, which, by the way, is kind of still going on. I wrote a similar poem around that same time, which I want to read. In fact, I think I wrote two similar poems. They're very short. This is called This Body, This Tree, This Earth. My group of friends touched our neighbor's group of friends. Our nodes seeped our serotonin to relax and bring down walls. Our oxytocin glued the branches together where we needed. It was how we made love. We were well aware that there were trillions more of us or beings like us. Together, we made a larger body. Those larger bodies also made love. But strangely enough, those larger bodies of beings were not aware that they were also part of larger networks that eventually made up a bigger body that they called Earth. Hence, they connected in destructive ways that were destroying not only Earth, their home, but their own bodies, our home. If only they learned to play differently. Poem. Leonoris Libris. I just read my poem, This Body, This Earth, This Body, This Tree, This Earth, which has a similar vibe to Alok Menon's poem that I just read, The Deepest Breath. Similar message as well. Next is also my poem, my original poem that I wrote. After this, I will read the title poem, Your Wound, My Garden. So I'm just reading, other poems first as I wait for more people to show up. All right. Next is called In Praise of Dirt. Hi, Ashley. This is my own original poem, In Praise of Dirt, that is very similar to Alok Menon's poem, The Deepest Breath. So, In Praise of Dirt. Dirt, earth, fungus, mycelium, diatoms, plankton, desert sands, roots that link the entire earth, 60 trillion bacteria and 360 trillion viruses in perfect ecosystem in our gut until it is not. And look at this dirt, these roots, these shoots that shoot out from mama bearing fruits. These leaves that open up to Papa's sky and boundless sun. I don't run away from this dirt. These noble little ones that keep me alive and in stabilizing, nourishing joy. The stars can wait. They don't bait me yet. After I love Mama enough, I may connect to Grandpa Time, great-grandmother timelessness, and their children, the stars. Love all of you, though, all my ancestors. Poem. Welcome, Soul on Fire. So tomorrow I have my Avida Bookstore Poetry Book Club in Tustin at 11 a.m. PST. I will be going live again tomorrow as well. This is the pre-show where I read some of my own original poems after I read the poems by the author of the book that will be featuring Your Wound, My Garden. Okay, now that we have more people show up, I'm going to read the title poem of the book, which is Your Wound is My Garden. I'm not interested in legitimacy. Legitimacy is a circus that requires me to convince others of what already is. I have more important things to do with my time. Does the ground have to authenticate itself to the feet? Does water have to substantiate itself to the tongue? I have nothing to prove. My dignity is not up to debate. It's not up for debate. I accept myself. And that is not only enough, it is everything. Contrary to popular belief, I'm not a character in your novel. I'm not an actor in your TV show. I'm not a statue in your courtyard. I belong firmly and irrevocably to myself. The only opinion about my appearance that matters is my own. I used to think that if I toned it down, I would be taken more seriously. But then I realized you will always find a way to discredit me. We both know. This was never about what I looked like. It was always about what you felt like. You cannot bear to see it. How I've made home here in your shame. I regret to inform you that the house of mirrors you have erected is not a home. You sculpt the world in your image because you need proof that what you see in the mirror is real. You could not accept yourself, so you made up history, science, identity to disguise your own self-doubt. I see behind the mask. Beneath every supremacy lies insecurity. Each insult is an invitation to quicksand, and I refuse to take the bite. It is not my responsibility to rescue you from your self-imposed quarantine from humanity. You don't know who you are without me. I know who I am without you. This is why you hate me. This is why I love you. Your wound is my garden. I have found life here in the places you have left for dead. Watch me bloom. Watch me bloom. Hi, Soul on Fire, Mauricio. Yeah, how was that poem? Let me know in the comments below. All right, now, so I think I'm going to intermingle their poem with my own poem that has a similar message or a similar vibe to it, right? So that poem was about dehumanization, right? So I wrote a similar poem called What It Costs You To When You Dehumanize Me. This was written on April 1st, 2022, the first day of National Poetry Month, right? Hi, Guidoisms. I'm about to read my poem, What It Costs You To When You Dehumanize Me. Call me cunning snake because you envy my flexibility, even though you have legs that can jump and move faster. Call me sly fox because you envy my wisdom, even though you have a bigger brain. Call me stupid sheep, because you envy my ability to cooperate and commune with others, even though you own an empire. Call me big bad wolf, because you envy my badass energy, even though your own unrestrained strength has almost destroyed the whole world, while I only brought down 3 houses. Call me scorpion, because you envy my clear aim when striking for what I desire, even though you have entire armies getting you what you want. Call me weeds, because you envy my tenacity and ability to be everywhere, connected to everything, even though you could have this too. If only you allowed yourself the humility to see how much in common you and I are. Call me gorilla, because you are scared of how much you have hurt us all, and you are afraid we will retaliate, even though it's only you that keep escalating disproportionately throughout history after claiming false victimhood. Call me beast, because you have lost your own humanity and can't see mine either, even though you ironically lost your own humanity while trying to dehumanize me. And finally, finally, call me kitten, because now you are so scared after imagining threatening figments of me, even though you'd be whole and safe. Only, if only you see my humanity. My humanity poem. And that's my poem, my original poem, What It Costs You To When You Dehumanize Me. There are many different levels to that poem. Often my poetry has multiple layers built in. The first layer is, of course, they're speaking to the good, evil, false binary and the related demonization, exotification, false binary, which is why the first 8 lines are all about violence and demonization. But the final line, the kitten line, is the opposite, because that's how they never see us as human. They either see us as a superhuman demon, or they see us as this little kitten, this peaceful monk, powerless. We're never allowed the middle ground of just being human. They see us as either super violent or the peaceful monk. And so that's what it speaks to. The other thing is, to me, it's so funny and very telling and very revealing that all of their insults are animal insults, which reveals more about them than about us, than about me as a racialized, colonized person. Because for me, it's only an insult if I have the same belief as them, which is that nature is inferior to a human, and that human beings are superior to nature, which is false. That's like saying I'm superior or inferior to myself. I'm one with nature. I am nature. I'm equal to nature. So for me, it's only an insult if I believe like them that nature is inferior to me. I don't believe it. I am these animals too. All of them and so much more. I am nature too. So I'm reclaiming every one of these insults as positive, because so by doing that, I'm not only reclaiming myself, I'm reclaiming nature from colonial narratives. That's what I'm doing. Because they want us to believe that colonial violence is nature or human nature. It's not. Colonial nature is not human nature. Colonial nature is not nature. Colonial nature is just colonial violence. Colonial violence is just colonial nature. It's not human nature. It's not nature at all. All right. Next is the poem that inspired that little diagram that you see right there. Care is our natural state. Care is our natural state. Right there. Okay? This is by Alok Menon. Once upon a time, I was born because of other people. I was fed and taught how to live because of other people. I became me because of the love of strangers who became my family. Love, compassion that didn't make sense but made survival. What if love then is the organizing force of the universe? Economists talk about self-interest, but the subject they conjure is a projection that they position as a prophecy for profit, not humanity. Listen to the poets instead. They take greed and peddle it as human nature. They take selfishness and masquerade it as our original state. But before language, I was a baby crying out in need. Being born is a natural disaster, and someone helped us make it out. James Baldwin once said that he could never be a pessimist because he was in fact alive. I felt what he meant. Do you? I can't get home safe alone and have to call a friend. I can't get out of bed and have to call a friend. I found you there, hidden there on the other side of I can't. I love and need you because I'm honest. Care is our natural state. Poem. Hi Betty, I was just reading this poem, Care is Our Natural State, from this book, the book that you see right up there, which will be the book club for this month. It will be officially tomorrow. This is the pre-show, as I put right there. And this is a poem that inspired that diagram that I drew. Care is our natural state. Okay? So welcome, Betty. All right. Welcome, fantastic homies. Next, I'm going to read and I'm going to read grammar lessons. Yes. This next poem is called Grammar Lessons. And for context, the author is a non-binary gender queer South Asian poet, meaning their pronouns are they, them. They don't go by he, him, nor she, her. In fact, I'm also non-binary genderqueer, which means my pronouns are also they, them, their, not he, him, just to be clear. So if you post anything about me, whether in the comments or if you speak about me, I request that you use the pronouns they, them. Don't, and just in general, don't assume somebody's gender just by their looks, because their looks don't determine their gender. And a lot of the poems in this book talk about that. And this is especially what this poem is about, grammar lessons. My first word was irony. Growing up a boy, they called me too feminine. When I finally claimed femininity as my own, they called me a man. These are grammar lessons. Some of us are only allowed to be thought, never to think. When they insist that our pronouns violate grammar to some degree, they are right. Grammar is less about the mechanics of language, more about the monopoly of it. It's not just about who can speak, but who gets to speak. He who controls the word controls the world. He who controls the word controls the world. What they mean is, don't object to remaining object. You are not a subject unless you subject yourself to me. In school, we were taught that basic sentence structure includes a subject and a predicate. How naive I was to believe that if you just found the right words and put them in the appropriate order, it would necessarily lead to understanding. How devastating. Meaning is not an equal opportunity employer. How devastating. Meaning is not an equal opportunity employer. I studied so hard. I choreographed my tongue to sculpt the incoherent sounds of my soul into language. What a tragedy to learn on the other side. It doesn't matter if you have all the right words when they think you have the wrong body. It doesn't matter if you have all the right words when they think you have the wrong body. Subject, predicate, power. In order to be understood, you must have power. What this means is that we could both launch the same words and they would still land in different places. What this means is that so often their words are prioritized more than our lives. Their words are prioritized more than our lives. What this means is that in order to understand us, you must wait. I don't think I can express that here. Meet me somewhere else. The body is three-dimensional. Beauty is the harshest editor. Beauty is the harshest editor. I could spend the rest of my life articulating every detail, every grain, every follicle, and still they would not understand because of what I look like. No, because of what they feel about what I look like. Because of what they feel about what I look like. A grammar lesson. If you were to scream in outer space, no one would hear you. Sound waves can travel through an empty vacuum. Only you would be able to hear yourself because the sound waves would still travel through your body. This is what it feels like to be brown, trans, femme, and alive. Poem. Yes, Betty, that's why I repeated those lines, those are powerful lines right there. He who controls the word controls the world. Meaning is not an equal opportunity employer. Exactly. Hi, Devin. Welcome. This next poem, exactly. That's why I love this book. And that's how I know that the whole argument about they them pronouns being singular, which by the way, uh, they used to be they them pronouns used to be singular anyways, and even Webster's has now has accepted once again that they them pronouns are singular. Well, just think about how would you know somebody is LGBTQ just by their looks? That's the whole point of the poem, right? So it shows who has the power when the default is he or she rather than the neutral they them in English. Now, whereas, for example, in the Filipino language, for example, the default, they don't have he, she pronouns. They only have gender-neutral pronouns to begin with. So the default is neutral. So in English, the fact that the default is he, she means that encoded into the very language itself, who has the power? Only straight people, only cisgender people. There's already a agenda. They talk about the queer agenda, but in reality it's a straight agenda, which is why the default everywhere is straight and cisgender. Ideally, no one should assume somebody's gender just by their looks. The default should be they, them, until the person speaks otherwise, until the person says, no, my pronouns are he, she, or he, her, or she, her, or they, them. So the fact that the default is he, she itself is twisted, it's upside down. That's the whole point of that poem. Ideally, I shouldn't have to say and keep repeating and repeating over and over and correcting people over and over again that I'm not he, him. To stop calling me he, him. Just in every life, almost every life that I am, and to say they, them. Then my pronouns are they, them. In reality, ideally, the default should always be start with they, them until the person speaks otherwise. Because you have no idea. You have no idea who a person is from their looks. Next is a related poem about the power of language. This is called English as a second language, but then the words English and second are crossed out. So the real title is Racism as a First Language. Racism as a first language. A euphemism refers to a more polite, indirect expression that replaces words and phrases regarded as unpleasant, harsh, or too real. Consider the following alternatives to dying. Free one's horses, kick the bucket, return to dust. Used in a sentence. In the United States, a reported 7,146 people are no longer with us due to COVID-19. Consider the following alternative for racism: Chinese virus. Used in a sentence, I've always treated the Chinese virus very seriously, Donald J. Trump. With the acknowledgement that being alive and Asian American increasingly constitutes a lethal condition, I wonder if it is time to consider the malignancy of politeness, the savagery of the civilized. How euphemisms can act as its own euthanasia. There are no painless deaths. There are just those we do not name to avoid the pain, and the pain we do not name to avoid the deaths. Let me repeat that because that's a powerful line. There are no painless deaths. There are just those we do not name to avoid the pain, and the pain we do not name to avoid the deaths. On March 14th, Pawi Kung Nang and his Burmese family went to a Sam's Club in Midland, Texas to purchase some bread. Jose Gomez, 19, stabbed him and his 2 children because he thought the family was infecting people with the coronavirus. Burmese children's names typically reflect the day they were born, a practice rooted in the idea that human destiny is connected to the stars. So I went outside and I apologized to them, the stars. But I'm sorry just felt stale, like a euphemism for something else, more honest, more just than this. In the duration it took to write this poem, 3 people died of COVID-19. By the way, this is the first time even though I've had this book for a few months, this is the first time I read this poem out loud. it's an interesting synchronicity because I'm Burmese too. I'm a Burmese national originally. Uh, so it's very poignant for me. And I want to speak to that too. My country of origin, Burma, where I'm from, and where this man is from, that they were talking about here, is among the top 5 countries to be most affected by climate change, along with Puerto Rico, Haiti, Pakistan, and the Philippines. So solidarity with those countries too. And also my people, the Burmese, over here in the United States, we have the highest poverty rates in the United States at twice the national average. Along with the Mongolians, they also have, so them and us, we have the highest poverty rates. So that turns upside down the model minority myth, right? The ridiculous idea that all Asians are, are rich and famous and privileged, when in reality, the rich Asians are usually the light-skinned Chinese, Japanese, and Koreans, and also to a certain extent some Indians as well. Let's see, what does Betty say? It goes beyond even that. It truly incorporates the whole universe of human beings, not to exclude gender identification, but how that default touches universe. Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah. Because some people are agender or gender neutral. They don't even identify with gender. Period. Right. So they don't have a gender at all. In that spectrum, I consider myself to be more of a gender fluid, and also I don't even like the term non-binary because uh, I only use it for lack of a better word. But really, sometimes I would prefer the term gender queer, for example, uh, because non-binary is describing myself by what I'm not, which is kind of absurd. Which again goes back to the fact that the default is the gender binary. And by the way, the gender binary is not only a social construct, it's also a racial construct because it's defined around not just what is a man or what is a woman, but specifically around what is a white man and what is a white woman. That's how it was created when the colonizers came along. Pre-colonial times, us indigenous people had gender diversity, and the colonizers did not like that at all. So they invented a binary not only socially but around race, which meant that the only man considered a man was a white man. The only woman considered a woman was a white woman, or a woman with Eurocentric features. So as long as you have straight hair or light skin or you're thin, you're considered a woman. Otherwise, you were not even considered a woman at all because you were not considered human. Same thing with the man. If you did not fit into the Eurocentric features, you were not considered a man at all because you were not even considered human. And even it's true to this day. These people, they still think they're the only humans on Earth, even though ironically they're the global minority, and we're the global majority. In fact, I wrote a poem about that uh, recently, which tied together all of these concepts. It's a poem against not only racism, but also against the gender binary. So let's see what happened here. So this is my own original poem that I wrote very recently. It's called No More Crooked Rooms, an ode to our first ancestor. Yes, that's where I'm coming from, the racial construct of the evilness of words. Exactly. It's and all of these are interconnected, right? The root that intersects all of this is eugenics, right? Because the gender binary also intersects with fat phobia, all of which is rooted in anti-blackness, right? Because what they were trying to do was a lot of uh, African indigenous women, as well as the gender queer people, had non-Eurocentric features, meaning they were a lot more curvy, a lot more thick, and And they were strong. They held positions of power in these African indigenous tribes, and the invention of the racial gender binary, in conjunction with the invention of fat phobia, was a way to take away the power of African women, African indigenous women, by saying these women are not women because they're not even human according to them. And then they were not considered human because they were thick, they were dark skinned, they did not have straight hair, all of these things. There's an excellent book about this written by, I believe, a Yoruba African woman. It's called The Invention of Women, which I highly recommend you read to educate yourself on this. Uh, and even the sex binary is actually skewed by the gender binary, because now they're discovering that even when it comes to the physical sexual features, there's more than two sex. So there's not only more than two genders, there's more than two sex as well. That's also been validated recently. So anyways, this is the poem that I wrote recently on May 23rd. And then I added a few more lines yesterday that really ties it all together. No more crooked rooms, an ode to our first ancestor. When you smile, are you showing me your love, joy, safety, serenity, solidarity, or your skeleton? I see crooked rooms everywhere that make us think our crookedness is right. Crooked rooms full of men defined solely as muscular, thin, tall, and white-hot burning flames instead of the safety of cool, dark caves, and no one else allowed into this exclusive club. Crooked rooms full of women defined solely as skinny, short, with straight hair and pale, the color of blood drained from the face, while anyone with skin the color of being sun-kissed regarded as not a woman. Just waiting for that noise to pass. Oh, yeah. All right, let me read that poem again from the top, because that was noisy and interrupted my poem. All right. No more crooked rooms, an ode to our first ancestor. When you smile, are you showing me your love, joy, safety, serenity, solidarity, or your skeleton? I see crooked rooms everywhere that make us think our crookedness is right. Crooked rooms full of men defined solely as muscular, thin, tall, and white-hot, burning flames instead of the safety of cool, dark caves, and no one else allowed into this exclusive club. Crooked rooms full of women defined solely as skinny, short, with straight hair, and pale, the color of blood drained from the face, while anyone with skin the color of being sun-kissed regarded as not a woman. Crooked rooms full of human defined solely as bland, stripped of all color, all culture, all humanity, in exchange for systemic power. Huh, ironic, isn't it? Hmm. Ironic because they think they're the only humans on Earth, but they gain power by giving up their humanity. So yes, I acknowledge the crooked rooms we are in, and I also acknowledge how we smash these crooked chairs, grind them into powder, wet them with our sweat, turn them into makeshift mortar, paste them onto the crooked floor to make it straight. This way we can at least stand up straight and see straight, even if we can't sit and rest yet. So yes, I'd rather touch our first ancestor than the lives of these colonizers. This is in fact how we free ourselves from these crooked rooms, touch the infinite space of our eternal, immortal first ancestor, truth. Poem. So that poem is inspired by the crooked room experiment, which I read about in the book The Three Mothers by Anna Malika Tubbs, who wrote that book. It's a biography of the mothers of Martin Luther King Jr., Malcolm X, and James Baldwin. So Alberta King, Louis Little, Bernice Baldwin. And in that book, she talks about the crooked room experiment, where if you put a person, you got to run. Yeah, you can listen to the replay. And also, I already did a live on specifically on the crooked room experiment, which you can watch the replay if you go back to my post on my profile. So I highly recommend it. You can also watch this replay too. So I'm about to finish myself, I think. I'll probably read one more poem from the book after this, after I explain this poem that I just read, which is my own original. So the crooked room experiment is that if you put a person in a crooked room where all of the objects are crooked, the walls are crooked, the floor is crooked, including the chairs, and if you have the person sit on the chair, they will claim and they will really believe that they are sitting straight even when they're tilted 35 degrees, as long as they match all the other objects in the room. Isn't that crazy? But it also makes sense, right? So it's a metaphor for the harmful psychological impact of misrepresentation from systemic racism, even on us racialized people. So it's not just about how white people treat us, but actually even on us as a racialized person. It has an impact on how we view ourselves if the only representation available are crooked versions of us, right? We twist our own sense of ourselves. We end up having lower self-esteem, etc. And we really have to fight and create protection spells over and over again every day to protect ourselves. And that's what it speaks to. And the first line, and then of course I also speak to the gender binary and how it's actually racialized when I talk about how the only men who are considered men are, men who are muscular or thin or tall, who look white, instead of the safety or cool dark caves. And I mention that because I'm trying to flip the idea that darkness is evil, when in reality, darkness is more, for a lot of animals, they burrowed caves into the ground during the winter because there's safety in that darkness. I also love how even Audre Lorde has flipped it. The author of Ray Barrett, Jordan Ifyoko, has also flipped that whole dark, light, evil binary by saying, in her book, it's not the dark arts that's considered evil, it's the pale arts that's considered evil in her fantasy. So I love that. So I'm trying to flip it here as well when I talk about, dark as the color of safety, which it is, by the way. Even Khalil Gibran mentioned it in one of his poems as well. Yes. You're welcome, Foothill Homie. And then, and And that's why I'm flipping the idea of pale. You know, pale can be regarded as a neutral color or a sickly color. We look pale when we're sick, so I don't understand why it's considered as a superior color, right? Actually, I do understand it's because of, you know, 1,000 years of colonial programming that pale is considered a superior color because these delusional people wanted us to think that the color white, the pale color, is superior, even though they're the global minority. The global majority is dark skin. So it boggles my mind that people who are minority think that they're the most beautiful people on earth and that dark skin is ugly. So I'm trying to reframe that as well. So there are multiple layers built into this poem when I mentioned that, right? When I mentioned about pale being the color of blood drained from the skin versus, dark is the color of being sun-kissed. Melanin, right, is the color of being sun-kissed. And then the first line is a line from a book called Tender is the Flesh. It's inspired by a dialogue from the book Tender is the Flesh. And there's a dialogue between these two characters who one character said, I don't understand why people consider it beautiful when you smile, because when you smile, you're showing your skeleton. It's like, whoa, that's one of those lines in the book where a single line can completely shift your perspective and really make you think, right? Because everything else is covered by skin and muscle. So your teeth are the only part of your skeleton that's shown. And so I love the way, the novel flips it, right? Yeah, I never thought of it like that either. So I thought it also has a double meaning where, if you're showing your skeleton, you're showing your secrets. But conversely, some people smile to hide their secrets as well, which is what Malcolm X said in his famous quote. By the way, on May 19th, it would have been his birthday. It was Malcolm X Day, and I posted this famous quote by Malcolm X. And within a few minutes, Instagram told me that they removed his quote on his own birthday for hate speech, which is again that reverse victimhood, right? Ironically, removing a quote that's speaking out against racism and calling it hate speech is the definition of the Euro colonizer hate reverse victimhood mentality, where they accuse the person speaking out against racism of being the bully. So I did a request for review, and they did eventually restore the comment, but with no apology, not even an acknowledgement that it has been restored. Uh, yeah, it's really something else, man. But yeah, the famous quote um, by Malcolm X basically was saying how the white, you know what? I think I'll just read the quote so that Instagram doesn't get on my case. Because if I'll do, I can just say, hey, there's a quote by a famous anti-racist. They did that too, by the way, Dr. King's famous quote, also on his own birthday, the one in which he said that the white moderate is a greater stumbling block to justice than the Ku Klux Klan. So this wasn't their first time. So Malcolm X here says the white conservatives aren't friends of the Negro either, but they at least don't try to hide it. They are like wolves. They show their teeth in the snarl that keeps the Negro always aware of where he stands with them. But the white liberals are foxes who also show their teeth to the Negro but pretend they are smiling. The white liberals are more dangerous than the conservatives. They lure the Negro, and as the Negro runs from the growling wolf, he flees into the open jaws of the smiling fox. Malcolm X. Hi, Seth Winderer, welcome. This is a pre-show to my poetry book club tomorrow. I just read a quote by Malcolm X, the one that Instagram tried to ban on his own birthday, ironically. So, again, there is an irony there, right? So, one more thing I want to add, speaking of reverse victimhood, they call us savages, right? But think about the stuff they did, like creating so-called human zoos, right? Where as recently as 1953 in Belgium, they kidnapped indigenous people from Africa, the Philippines, and India, and they put them in literal zoos and literally treated us like animals, put them in the same enclosures as monkeys and tigers, etc. And in fact, in 1908, they even tied a 5-year-old Filipino girl to a pole. Now, the monkeys and tigers were not tied to a pole, but a 5-year-old girl was tied to a pole. So think about the savagery of that, right? And another bit of savagery that they did includes literally on the slave ships when supplies were low, they they would eat the African people that they had kidnapped and enslaved. They would literally eat them. So who's the real savage here? And I mention that because Tender is the Flash is a story about that's supposedly about the future, where because of a virus you cannot eat animal meat anymore, so human beings started eating each other in a very systematic way. There was factory farming of human meat. So the author writes it as if it's the future, but it's already happened to Black people, similar to The Handmaid's Tale, right? That's already happened as well. It's not the future, it's the past. And yeah, and also they did something similar to Nat Turner after the slave revolt. They used his skin for accessories, and they used the fat from his body as grease to cook food. So tell me who's the real savage? And that's why I consider words like savage and thug to be a racial slur against my people, because those were the words that the colonizers, the British, used to criminalize my ancestors, and they called us thugs, and they killed 10 million of my people, including newborn babies. So that's what I mean by reverse victimhood, right? They were attacking these lands, and the people were just defending them, and they called the people defending the lands thugs. So they pretended they were the victims, and that the people defending were bullies, and then they escalated disproportionately. That's the modus operandi, always. All right, one more poem from this book, and I think I'm done. This is called New Year's Revelations. So every year, the author would write a list of what they have learned in the previous year, and this is one of them, one of those revelations. There are 11 points here. 1. There are far more pursuits than being liked, like being. Not all knots need to be untied. You are not for everyone. You are for you. How devastating, how gorgeous. 3. Their fear is not your own. Emancipate yourself from their shame. Protect your beauty. 4. Authenticity is an orientation, not a destination. Live many lives, each one as true as the last. 5. Failure is stagnancy, not sinking. Perhaps the treasure you were seeking was waiting there all along, beneath your capsized ego. 6. No one is coming to rescue you. This is not a tragedy. It's an opportunity to become the person you were waiting for. Feeling is dangerous, but what do you call dissociation? Better to know the origin of a bruise than not. 9. There are words and worlds that don't exist yet. Make them up. Few things are more real than fiction. 10. Design murals for all the miracles. Paint them in every conversation. Make hope contagious. 11. Once upon a time, someone felt your loneliness. Find ancestors. Become their living memorial. Poem. Welcome, Mr. Fun. I'm just reading poems from this book, Your Wound, My Garden. And this is the pre-show. The actual book club is tomorrow. It's in person, but I'll be posting a clip on Instagram Live as well. So which is why I did this pre-show, because tomorrow it will be more like just 15 or 20 minutes probably, or maybe half an hour at the most. So I'm doing a more detailed live today as a pre-show, as well as a way to promote the book club tomorrow. It's at 11 a.m. Pacific, 2 p.m. Eastern. All right. Peace and love, everyone. Bye.